Let us pray. O eternal Lord God, from whom alone cometh wisdom and understanding, we beseech thee to direct aright the minds of those who are about to take counsel together on matters pertaining to the common life of this borough of Christchurch, that in all their deliberations and decisions they may faithfully discharge the duties of their office and ever promote the health, safety, and well-being of those they seek to serve, for the honour and glory of thy holy name. Amen.
Thank you.
We join together our tribute and pray for Peter's family as they mourn, in the words of the Lord's Prayer, as we say together, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever.
Gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the full council. I'm Councillor Nick Geary, the Mayor, and I am the chairman of this committee meeting, and officers have their names in front of them for ease of reference. In order to assist in the process this evening, I must ask everybody to ensure that their mobile phones are either switched to off or silent mode. We would be grateful if you would remain quiet whilst the meeting is in progress. I would like to remind everybody present that this meeting will be filmed by the council and broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the chamber, it is possible that the cameras will capture your image. By your presence, you are deemed to consent to be filmed, and the use of images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Finally, there are no planned fire drills this evening. If the fire alarm sound, please evacuate the buildings immediately via the emergency exits and one in the corner of the chamber and the door you came through. Thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Mrs. Darren Williams.
Thank you. Item 3, are there any declarations of interest by members? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As the Regent Centre is mentioned twice on the agenda, I'm the council's representative, or one of the council's representatives, so I just ought to declare that, but I shall still be able to take part and vote. Thank you.
Item 4, the minutes. Do I have a proposer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to propose the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of October and on the 16th of November. And I believe I have a seconder in the Deputy Leader.
Thank you. Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to second that.
Thank you. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous, thank you. Item 5, announcements. I'll stand for this because I've got an awful lot to say for a change. Since we last met, on your behalf, I attended some 50 engagements. Every one was a pleasure. And we were always received and pleased to be seen and made us always very welcome. Christmas has been very busy so far, with some 8 carol services and concerts. All have been very well attended. Those at the Priory were full. The standard of singing from the young school children was amazing. It was a pleasure to visit several care homes in the borough. The residents were all very happy and very well looked after. We held a quiz night at the Christchurch Sailing Club and nearly 100 took part, even a team from here. And it was amazing. It really was. It was a lot of fun and it raised £760 for my charities. And thank you all of those who actually took part, and we will do another one in the new year. Lastly, I must mention a very special evening. And it was to honour and on behalf of the Queen, I presented a Queen's Award to a very special group of volunteers who have worked hard and entertained over many, many years, come rain, come shine. This weekend is always very special in Christchurch, and that's the stomping of the Quomps. It was with great honour that I presented them all with a badge, and the Queen's Award is lodged in here in the cabinet, I believe, for people to see. And we really thank them all for what they've done for Christchurch over many, many, many years. Lastly, I'd like to invite the members of the council to some refreshments in the committee room after the proceedings. Thank you. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one item in terms of announcements this evening is just to remind members of the Bournemouth, Dorset and Poole Minerals site plan, which this council will be making a representation. The representation period is the 1st of December to the 31st of January 2018, and I would encourage members to also make a representation in their own right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Hey, Leader. Before I ask the Chief Executive to make his report, I would, however, like to read a letter subsequent to the card that we sent the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh on the pleasure of her 70th wedding anniversary. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh would like to thank you and all concerned for the kind message of congratulations on the occasion of their 70th wedding anniversary. Her Majesty and His Royal Highness much appreciated your thoughtfulness in writing as you did, and in return send their warm wishes to you all. That's the letter that came from the Queen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members. Nothing for me to report this evening. Thank you.
We take item 6 on the agenda, which is questions by members of the public. I'm advised that one question has been received from Mr. Biggin. Mr. Biggin, would you like to ask your question?
Good evening. I'm representing the Jumpers and St Catherine's Hill Residents Association. On Tuesday the 28th of November 2017, Hampshire County Council formally informed Christchurch Council that it would not take over from Dorset County Council the provision of first-tier local authority functions. This has resulted in Christchurch Council's inadequate alternative to the plan submitted to the Secretary of State by Future Dorset ceasing to exist. We understand that any viable alternative to the Future Dorset proposal must A, increase the efficiency of local government across the whole of Dorset, B, make better geographic sense than a Christchurch Bournemouth pool unitary, and C, have local consent within Dorset. It is not clear to us how joining with Hampshire would have met any of those criteria. However, having been afforded the best part of a year to prepare an alternative proposal, have it tested in the public domain and obtained local consent, Christchurch Council have failed in that responsibility. What steps do you now intend to take to rectify the mediocre performance of Christchurch Council under your leadership?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Biggin, I totally refute your unfounded comment regarding a mediocre performance of Christchurch Borough Council, and would remind you and the members of Jumpers and St Catherine's Hill Residents Association of the awards that this council has recently attained. Moreover, the increased workload that this council is having to endure due to local government reorganisation. I would respectively remind Mr. Biggin that we are currently in the process of a local referendum, thus giving the residents of Christchurch an opportunity to have their say as to whether they wish to be part of a new authority with Bournemouth and Poole, and to the fact that this council voted by 2/3 majority not to support option 2B. The results of the referendum won't be known until Thursday evening of the 14th of December. Should residents wish to join Bournemouth and Poole, then your question is irrelevant. However, if the majority of residents vote no, then Christchurch Council's response to the Secretary of State regarding any such modifications or alternatives to the current proposal will follow through the due council process via a task and finish group already set up for that purpose, and then full council and an extraordinary meeting on January the 2nd. And I would confirm that this council is fully aware of the criteria required to support any such proposed alternative or modification to the future Dorset proposal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biggin.
Thank you. We need some explanations for our members. Our own analysis shows that moving Christchurch into Hampshire would have increased Christchurch overheads to such an extent that to remain solvent, you would have had to reduce services to the taxpayer. Will you now, tomorrow, please publish the details of Christchurch's financial analysis that you relied on, together with the logic path that Christchurch followed, which led you to decide that reducing services to our members was a better course for the taxpayer than forming a new council with Bournemouth and Poole?
Leader.
Mr. Mayor, clearly I do not have that information with me this evening, so I will provide Mr. Biggins and his Residents Association with a written response. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, petitions from members of the public. There are none. Item 8, questions by members of the council. I'm advised that a question has been received from Councillor D. Jones. I'll invite Councillor D. Jones to ask the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, Councillor D.C. Jones. Councillor D. Jones is sitting next to me. Mr. Mayor, I have had, as I said when I submitted the questions, I've had the opportunity to discuss the matter with the leader. He has given me the information that I required, and I now understand that he is well aware that there are alternative interpretations of the government's position than those recently given in another place. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now take item 9 on the agenda, committee minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to propose as set out. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour to receive the minutes?
I wanted to ask a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's in relation to the minutes and in particular the Resources Committee meeting of the 6th of December, page 7 of the minutes, and in particular minute 211, fourth paragraph, where I spoke about the concern that my residents mentioned about buses being moved to Bridge Street. There's no mention of that at all. We asked if it would be put on the back burner. There's no mention at all that that question was raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. That will be discussed on the next agenda item. In that minute will be discussed. I'd like to take a vote on the minutes. Those in favour of the minutes to being received?
Mr. Mayor, can you ask the members to vote clearly?
Can I ask the members to vote clearly? We have a thank you very much.
It's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We take item E, the Resources Committee, 6th of December 17. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Minute 211, it's recommended that the formal consultation be carried out on the fees, charges and management measures detailed in Appendix 3. The next one is B, and that is funding of 319,000 be allocated from unallocated reserves to the capital programme to carry out reconfiguration works described in paras 4.4c and 4.6b and C of this report. One thing I would like to add, Mr. Mayor, is the fact that we already have about 20,000 to take off that 319, because that was a 106 agreement, so it won't be 319, it should be just about 300,000. On C, the head of property and engineering, in consultation with me, the chairman of resources, explored the possibility of providing coach parking at Willow Way. And D, the start time of evening charges in Wick Lane car park revert back to 1830 with effect from the 14th of December 2017. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Your seconder?
I'm happy to second again, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member wish to debate on item 211? Ernie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've already asked my question.
Go further on 211. I'll put the proposal to the vote. Those in favour? Clearly. Those against? Thank you. Any abstentions?
3.
2.
3. Mr. Mayor. That's carried.
Minute 212. Any debate? Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor. What I would like to emphasise is that work to be undertaken at the Avon Beach Promenade is to ensure that this council protects our cliff and beach from the erosion and storm damage. It is very clear to see the authority east of Chewton Bunny have not protected their cliff and beach. The main reason why the Resources Committee decided to bring this project to full council was in order for all members to be fully aware of how the financial figures have escalated as much as by 450%. It has been caused by the increase in the work being required. Also, the change has been made to the method of fixing the precast concrete units in place to resist the forces generated during extreme storms. We're also very aware that the decision needed to be made quickly, so if members gave their support, the contractor could be given the go-ahead almost immediately. We're also concerned that our council taxpayer were getting value for money, and that's most important. The Avon Beach certainly contributes to the tourist industry, and which I understand brings over £100 million a year to our ancient borough. So, Mr. Mayor, what I'd like to propose on page 8, we've got two recommendations. A, back boxes be removed from the specification. B, Scrutiny and Policy Overview Committee, as requested, to review the process for estimating the cost of construction projects. Then, Mr. Mayor, we have a paper showing quite clearly two other recommendations. So instead of being A and B, there would be C and D, because we've already had A and B. So A, the buff-coloured surfacing of the promenade and the solar-powered uplighters are not included in the Avon Beach Promenade project. B, the 144,400 is allocated from unallocated revenue reserves to the capital programme to fund the Avon Beach Promenade project in order for construction work to commence in January 2018. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Seconder for that?
Carry on, please.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Any debate? Councillor Bungie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the committee debate, I opposed this and I still oppose it. The existing protection and wall have been there for many, many years and have done a good job. The only reason I can see for carrying this work out is to protect the beach huts. Now, we know previously the beach huts used to be removed. That is not done anymore, and therefore the lessee of the premises has to take their chances. And I think it's wrong that the council taxpayer is being asked to fork out nearly £250,000 towards this project. Now, the other concern I have is the trees in the embankment at the back, because the existing wall is there. If you look at go behind the beach huts and look at the trees where they've been marked for either cutting down or for lopping, very severe lopping I might add, the chances of survival of some of those trees is, I would say, quite limited. If you also add on the fact that they are now talking about raising the wall, if that wall is to be substantial, that could also affect the embankment behind and the rooting of those trees, because there's going to be substantial building works, excavation, reinforcement works presumably going into that wall if it's going to be effective. So I can't support this because I don't think it is absolutely necessary. We've had what is there now for, well, as long as I can remember and as long as I've lived here, and only once have we had the extreme situation when beach huts weren't put away for the winter where they were severely damaged and destroyed. So I'm sorry, I think this is an extreme waste of council taxpayers' money. And in that meeting of resources, we were talking about spending a total of £1.2 million with all the different projects that we had here. And I'm sorry, I think that there are other items like the Regent Centre, which the whole of the borough use and people from outside the borough, that are very important. And I don't think that this has the same importance. Thank you.
Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe, as ward councillor, I've looked into this a lot, and I believe the councillor has misinterpreted what we are trying to achieve within that area. In the Valentine's Day storms, the promenade was completely destroyed, and the risk to our coastline and to the whole of the area behind the beach huts was actually at greater risk. And this is not a project to protect beach huts. This is a project to hold the line on our sea defences, which our council is tasked with doing. So I think to say that this is to protect beach huts is totally and utterly misinterpreting what we are meant to be doing and why we are investing in this. And I'd quite like to have clarification from our officer to that effect, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to reaffirm what my colleague, Councillor Bath, has just said. We had the borough engineer came to the Friarscliff Residents Association back in March, and he emphasised that it was coastal protection was the predominant requirement for this work. Similarly, I think in June this year, the Director of Services, encompassing engineering, also presented to the Friarscliff Residents Association, taking on board questions which were put to him previously. And again, people were told it was coastal defences and they understood that. And lastly, when we had the coastal consultation, either in July or August, a third-party specialist I was speaking to, he also again said, yes, this will assist with coastal protection. So I will support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Colin Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm standing to speak in support of the proposal. I used to be a representative on the Dorset, the Southwest Coastal Flood Committee, which looked at all coastal impacts from storms, amongst other things. And after the Valentine's storms that caused such devastating effect to our coastal line and the promenade, and also other parts of the coast going down through Dorset, we had a meeting here of the Southwest Flood and Coastal Committee, and we went and had a look at the impact that had happened from the storms. And it was quite clear to us as a group that had we not had the protection that we had put in over the years, that had been failed on the other side of Chewton Bunny in Hampshire, that our coastline would be devastated. And it would be absolutely remiss of us as an authority not to protect the coastline by carrying out this modest amount of work, because coastal flood protection is an expensive business, and we have to protect our coast, and we have to invest, in my opinion, Mr. Mayor, in this, which is a modest scheme, and it is going to protect the promenade, it'll protect the banks, which would otherwise get wiped away, and the line would be breached if we didn't do this. So I will be supporting the proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I remind my friend Councillor Bungay that he actually asked the finance officer if there were sufficient funds, and he was told that there were sufficient funds. In fact, you mentioned earlier on about various items coming to over £1 million. That was part of your question, and I think the finance officer who was here, you may wish to ask him again, but he confirmed that there were sufficient funds. Thank you.
If it's on that point, councillor.
It is on that point. The councillor is quite right. I did ask about the funds that were available and the amount of money that was being expended. And taking the whole total through that budget and other things that we have possibly ahead of us, I still consider that this is excessive amount of council tax money to spend on this project.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor David Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this item came through planning in October. Now, I've checked through the minutes. I can't find exactly the sum that was mentioned, but my recollection is that it was not either the sums that appear on the supplementary paper before us. That is one item of concern. The second item of concern, though of course this is going to be mitigated, and as Vice Chairman of the Scrutiny Committee, I welcome the referral or the proposed referral of this to the Scrutiny Committee, because it is a matter of concern that estimates are as they are. Mr. Mayor, if I thought this were for the benefit of a private enterprise, or even for the benefit of the council in keeping the beach huts, I would not support it. In the planning application in October, we were, however, shown quite graphic diagrams, and I see that we have the planning officers here who may or may not be able to confirm it, that the promenade as it is now is in a very dangerous state. It could collapse. It could, if another storm appears, there could be devastating damage. Mr. Mayor, this council, as it is entitled to do with its own coastline, voted that we should hold the line. We should not, as we were recommended, I believe, pursue a policy of managed retreat, as other authorities on this coastline are doing. And that is something that is very worthwhile that this council, as a local authority, can carry out. If we do not do this, and I have seen some quite disturbing studies, a similar storm, and it need not be a winter storm, because 3 years ago on holiday in Germany, I looked at the television in the bar and it said Großer Sturm am Englischer Südkust, together with a picture of Milford Haven. We are in a position where we could find damage, quite serious damage, at any time. I understand the concerns of some of my constituents who have expressed concern over the motives for this. But in my considered opinion, we are now in a position where if we are to hold the line, we have no choice. I am concerned about the process by which this figure was reached. I am concerned about the variations in the figures. We can look at those in another place. So I will be supporting very reluctantly this proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Spittle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do feel I must disagree with one of the previous speakers who dislikes the idea of all this work, simply because Avon Beach is one of the jewels of this borough. And to say that or to imply that it is only open to local residents is certainly not true. It draws people from considerable distances away. As a result, it also increases the income to the borough, and very importantly, it increases the income to this council from the receipts of the car park. So it is in our interest, financially as well as to protect the line, that we do follow the recommendation, which I certainly will support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members. I merely wanted to remind my colleagues that when the application through planning, there wouldn't have been a discussion about money, because the cost is not a material matter, and therefore we would not have discussed it. I'd also like to remind everybody who wasn't at planning that we had a very long discussion about the effect on the trees, and our borough cultural officers actually assured us that the damage would be very minimal and it wasn't something for us to worry about.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lofts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that I have asked to come in because my colleagues and others have mentioned the bad weather of 3 years ago, Valentine's Day. Could I gently remind people that it's not just the bad weather, it is the direction from which it comes. And the start of that bad weather on Valentine's Day 3 years ago, I think 2014, was from the south, and it was from the south for a prolonged period of some hours, and that is where the damage came from, and perhaps why we haven't had so much damage in the line from Chewton Bunny through to the harbour since, because the weather has come from its normal direction of the southwest, perhaps a little bit south of southwest, and we are protected by the Purbeck coast and indeed partially by Hengistbury Head. The reason why the damage came from the south is there was no protection till we got over to that place that's to the south of us, best part of 100 nautical miles away, and my belief is that's why we had the particular trouble on that day. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's no other speakers, I'd ask Councillor Hall to sum up. Councillor Nottage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that this matter has been under review, I think since 2008 we actually started this project of looking at this problem on this area. And listening to the issues that have been raised by the scrutiny, by the Resources Committee, who obviously weren't able to come to a decision, which is why we're debating it here, I'm reflecting on the fact that, in fact, our officers haven't done such a bad job, really, have they? I mean, you're in a situation where who can decide how much a project will be within 10% without going out to estimates? But what they have to do is to come to us and say it's going to be about something or other. And this is a particularly difficult project, in my opinion, requiring some technical information, some technical work, which is possibly beyond the approach from, or the qualifications of our officers. So I think they've done a pretty good job in getting to where we are. I have to say, I concur with my colleagues who have indicated just how important this whole process is of shore protection. And again, just reiterate the point that if you look east at Chewton Bunny, you will see what happens when you don't, when you're not assiduous with your actions in respect of coastal
protection. We've done a pretty good job for the last 40 years. Our officers should be, I think, congratulated. I do have one regret, though, and that is that in concluding, as we made this evening, it seems to me that what we might be doing is stepping over a pound to pick up a penny. I like the idea of the solar lights. I like the idea of that little finished, I'll give you the coloured tarmac, I absolutely agree with that. But why don't we have that little bit of technology and that little bit of quality when we actually take this decision? It's going to cost us about £3,000 or something or other. Come on, guys. It seems to me that we could actually give that to in terms of design and style in this very important part. I will be supporting this, but I would ask the Chairman of Resources to look again at this £3,000 for the light. I think you're stepping over a pound to pick up a penny. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If there are no more debate, I'll ask Councillor Hall to sum up, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief if I can. I agree with Councillor Notchett. It would add a little extra to that project, and it's £3,700. As you said, it's a penny to save a pound. But really, the coastal officer, and I think he's done a great job. I think every time I've contacted Lindsay Cass for information, he's been very quick to get me answers and very helpful to get this project to where it is tonight. So I think that side of it, Mr. Mayor, has been done exceptionally well. I also would like to say that I've lived here slightly longer than Councillor Bungie, and I remember when we've had storms, in front of the cafe, there was a lawn, trees, steps going down, a lion's piece of beach before you got to the high water mark. I also remember, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sure you do, when we had a freshwater lagoon at Friars Cliff. Again, through a winter storm, that disappeared, and so did the sand dunes. So really, this is a very important project to make sure we save the cliff and the beach at the same time. And I'm very pleased that we can bring it to fruition tonight, and I shall be supporting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll now put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? One against. Those abstentions? None? Thank we now look at Councillor Nottage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to reiterate the point that I made about the lights. I really think that there's a possibility that we could delegate the decision in respect of the lights to the Chair of Resources.
I think that can be done. We now take minute 213. Any debate on 213 in Regent Centre? Proposer? Councillor Hall?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Repair to the Regent Centre Auditorium. And this is a very important building. It does bring in a lot of visitors to the town, and it really is an asset to this borough. So the recommendation is that A, 550,000 is allocated from the unallocated revenue reserve to the capital programme to fund the essential repair to the South Water Regent Centre Auditorium described in section 3 of this report. That's A. B, the main repair works to the South Ward described in paragraphs 3.5 to 3.9 on this report are carried out in the summer of 2019. And if I may explain, Mr. Mayor, the reason for that is that they've got bookings at Regent Centre. If they do lose seats, they would have to pay compensation to the artists and people that are coming. So it would be a slack time for them, and it gives them plenty of time, but it will add 50,000 to the cost of the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder?
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Most certainly can. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. As a past member of the Management Committee at the Regent Centre, I know that it is really very well attended and loved by our local citizens, and it would give me great pleasure to second the proposal.
Thank you. Is there any debate? Any questions or debate? Everybody seems to be very content. I'll put it straight to the vote then. Those in favour? Those against? That's unanimous. Thank you, member. We now take item minute number 215, the medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Hall.
Thank you again very much, Mr. Mayor. This will be the last time I stand up tonight, so you'll be pleased about that. Minute 215, it's recommended that members note the content of this report. That's A. B. The localised council tax support scheme, as set out in Appendix 10, is recommended for approval. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any seconder? Councillor Jameson.
Happy to second. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions or debate? Very quiet tonight. Put it to the vote. Those in favour? It's unanimous, Mr. Mayor. Now take item 10, the Members' Allowance Scheme 2017-2018.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment to the recommendation as set out in this evening's agenda. I'd like to propose that item B be totally removed and be replaced with recommendation C of the independent panel's report at C, and that be actioned. And I believe I have a seconder in the Deputy Leader. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second this again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. There's been some discussion recently about members' allowances and about the reasons why we do what we do and stand on doorsteps and get shouted at and various other things. But I think we should always remember that we are the servants of the public. Despite what some political philosophies say, we are not the public's masters. In supporting the foregoing of the allowances, I would just point out that there are two motives for doing something like this. One motive is to say, well, we can't do this because if we do, everybody will shout at us. The second motive is that we forego our allowances because it is the right thing to do. I do not believe at this time it would be appropriate for any increase to be made in the members' allowances, Mr. Mayor. And if I can just look at because my computer has not behaved itself, we're looking at, see, recommendation C, that the basic, that I should have gone the other way. Recommendation C, page 31. Thank Mrs. Bruce for her assistance. That recommendation that we should not, I believe, take any increase in allowances either by variation of the proportions or by an increase in the flat rate, Chairman. So I think that would be the appropriate thing to do at this time, and I would so propose.
Thank you, David. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I merely wanted somebody to please clarify what item C was so that everybody was aware what they're voting on.
Leader.
Yes, this item C of the independent panel's view, it was put forward that a responsibility allowance be given to vice chairs, and it would appear that our constitution does not allow for that, and therefore this gives officers the opportunity to revisit our constitution with a view to maybe providing extra, or should I say, a responsibility allowance for vice chairs as opposed to the portfolio holder arrangement that we had prior to May this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, sorry, that's cost me in.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm grateful for that clarification. Can I therefore propose that the report be noted and that no further action be taken at this point?
Councillor Hallam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members. I just really wanted to ask the question as to how much the cost was of this report, please.
Mr. Mayor, I have had conversations with officers this afternoon with regard to the cost. And whilst I have nothing in writing, I've been assured that the cost of this exercise, which we have to do in accordance with 2.1 and 2.2 as set out on the agenda, will probably be in the region of £500. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader.
That's very happy. I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hallam. Councillor Bungey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Jones. I think at this time and this day and age, we need to look very carefully at things, and I would propose that members' allowances remain at their current level and are not changed at this time. We wait until
there's already a proposal on the table for that, Councillor.
2019. Thank you.
Councillor Spittle.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I proposed, is it in order for Councillor Bungay to propose a similar motion before there was a second?
I'm happy to second what Councillor Jones said then.
Thank you.
It's already on the table, Colin. Councillor Spittle.
From what one of my colleagues has said, could the leader just read out recommendation C? Because in the papers I have in front of me, I only have the recommendation 3, not C. So I would appreciate some clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I point members to the agenda item? And we are looking at item 3.2 on page 31, which goes over the page 32, and C is there, and I will read it out for members, that no allowance be awarded to the vice chairs of committees, but that this matter be reviewed in the light of evidence to be considered at the next review of the scheme. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. I was actually...
Councillor Nottage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually think that we should send a vote of thanks to the gentleman who prepared this report, because it's quite revealing as far as I'm concerned. I concur with my colleagues in respect of the need at this critical stage to increase allowances or any relationship to allowances for members, basically due to the fact that this was started some 5-6 years ago, when it was realised that an objective could be set whereby the
low a level of allowances in Christchurch could be brought up to those similar in the rest of Dorset. Well, of course, that's not necessary anymore, and therefore, whilst I think that the author of this report has made a very good job, as far as he could go, he's made some very interesting nuances associated with his with the explanations that have been given to him. I'm going to support Councillor Jones and Councillor Bungay in respect of actually saying not at this time. I don't think it's the right time, and we should not proceed with this report in any shape or form. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Notted.
Mr. Mayor,
Leader.
just for clarity, that was the proposal that I made from the start, that the report be noted and no action be taken. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor. I think some of us still understand that.
Thank you.
On that note, we'll go to the vote. That was a good bit of poetry. Those in favour of the report?
No, not the report,
Of the recommendation. I do apologise. It's getting late.
Unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
We now take item 11, the Inter-Authority Agreement Rochot Hill Sang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm recommending the report, which, as you can see, covers several pages here. I don't particularly propose to read out the whole recommendation as it goes on, rather. Anybody can find it on the internet if they're watching at home, or we can all see it here on our paper. This report comes to full council. It's a crucial element in the two planning applications relating to the development of Rochot Hill, and I'm going to recap where we are currently. Rochot was allocated in the council's 2014 local plan, and that delivers us much needed homes, up to probably 900, which we do need. However much we might think that we want to remain the same, we do need these homes. So moving forwards in time to June of this year, the planning committee granted outline planning permission for up to 875 dwellings. And you can read it, I think it's 2.2 on this report, what this application will deliver in terms of the much needed infrastructure and affordable housing. This resolution to grant was subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement, which is yet to be completed, so the planning permission has in fact not yet been issued. The site is located within 5 kilometres of designated and protected European heathland sites. And we need to provide what we call a SANG, and I will read out the full name, which is Suitable Alternative Natural Green Space. And this is a prerequisite to enable the planning permission to be granted and mitigate the impact of the development. Provision for this SANG was applied for under a separate application for which a resolution to grant was made under delegated powers in December 2016. And this decision is also subject to the completion of the legal agreement. So where we are at the moment is that our residential application seeks to deliver up to 900 dwellings on the Rochot site. This application remains live, and it's got a resolution to grant subject to completion of the legal agreement. This can't be concluded until the agreement for the SANG application has been completed and the permission issued. The area of SANG necessary to mitigate the amount of development proposed for Rochot falls within 3 separate jurisdictions, and those are Christchurch Borough Council, New Forest District Council, and the New Forest National Park Authority. In itself, the amount of SANG land which falls within this council's planning jurisdiction wouldn't be sufficient to offset the harm to the European protected sites, given the amount of the homes that are being proposed. So this report, which you have before you, introduces an inter-authority agreement, which is a logical and, we believe, a consistent approach to the deliverability and enforceability of the SANG provisions. This agreement shall confer upon this council the enforcement functions of New Forest District Council and NFNPA in terms of the SANG. I'm sorry, I'm reading, I'm just reading out lots of letters, but I'm sure now you're with me. So 4.2 in your document, this council shall be empowered by NFDC and NFNPA, and I will read it out if anybody's baffled, to take their enforcement powers relating to the SANG within their jurisdictional control. And this is crucial so that a joined up approach to enforcement and management of this SANG going forwards can be achieved. And it makes sense given that the scheme for the housing and infrastructure falls within this council's control. And this agreement also makes provision in terms of costs such that each council shall bear its own costs in relation to the agreement. So, in conclusion, our constitution requires that this matter is reported at full council, which is what we are now doing. The inter-authority agreement is required as a matter of law, so as to achieve the conferral and acceptance of the planning functions from the other authorities, which, as we know, is NFDC and NFNPA. So our recommendation allows for this to occur, as well as the reciprocal conferral if this council defaults and a step-in procedure is required. A delegation to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Head of Planning makes sense. This is our Chief Executive and our Head of Planning. Makes sense given that the agreement has to be finalised by officers and that the neighbour authorities, they have to authorise their own governments as well. So I can only say that this is a very long and well thought out report, and I must congratulate the officers and the legal team who have been very assiduous in putting it together. And I recommend it to the council, and I'm happy to propose it as set out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Do I have a seconder?
Please.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very happy to second. This has taken a long time to come to where we are, and it's very important we get it right.
Thank you. Any further questions to Councillor Bungey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having heard about the legal agreement and this authority taking responsibility for enforcing such a thing, can we be told if this authority ceases to exist in 2019, does this legal requirement transfer to any new authority or does it fall by the wayside? I think we'd like to be reassured that the legal requirements would remain in place should that horrible thought happen. Thank you.
Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bungey. I'm sure that's something that our legal officer can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, essentially the point being the Section 106 agreement will include successors, so successor councils, be it a district, a borough, or indeed a unitary. And the actual inter-authority agreement itself, the parties defining this council, New Forest District Council, and New Forest National Park Authority will also include their successors as well. So yes, it will protect the longevity of the Section 106 agreement and indeed this inter-authority agreement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, are there any costs associated with this scheme that would fall disproportionately on Christchurch Borough Council?
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. I'm going to pass that over as well to the legal advice.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of costs in compiling a Section 106 agreement, what happens is the instructed lawyer, that would be myself or another lawyer within the legal team, can recoup our costs from a developer or landowner. So in terms of actually preparing the Section 106 agreements for the operational development, that is the homes and the infrastructure, as well as the SANG Section 106 agreement, that's the site of alternative natural green space, we can recoup our costs and legal fees in terms of that. In terms of the inter-authority agreement, the costs are bared by each particular respective council, but if you're looking at the actual operative costs, that is if we step in, to enforce the obligations contained within the Section 106 agreement and indeed the inter-authority agreement. We will bear our own costs, as will our neighbouring authorities if they have to step in because this council defaults. So what the agreement does is enshrines this council as being the authority who should actually manage, maintain and enforce for the sake of the sang. But if we default, the other authorities, then obviously protecting their position, have the corollary right to step in at their own cost, deal with the breach and then step back out again. That's why we get the conferral to this council in the recommendation, as well as a second conferral to the authorities if we breach, because it makes sense so as to not have a second report come to you, given that the Constitution requires this to be dealt with by full council. So costs will be bared by each respective side.
Thank you for that concise answer. Thank you.
Can I, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor, just to come back on just the point that I was looking for was the administration cost of the scheme, which we are undertaking on behalf of the three authorities.
Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know that. Yes, I believe Officer King will come to the table.
Good evening, Mayor and members. The issue of the costs of the maintenance of the 106 and any step-in rights is dealt with in the legal agreement in the 106 agreement. The sang land will be owned and maintained by the current landowner to a scheme that is agreed with this council and Natural England. There is a fund set aside as part of the legal agreement, part of the 106 agreement, that if the landowner defaults on his obligations in respect of the 106 agreement, then this council can step in and put right that work at no cost to this council. It is a revolving fund. If he defaults, we spend the money. He has to put the money back in the pot to ensure that there is no cost to this council.
Thank you, Linda. Are there any further questions or debate? Then I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Item 12, the change to the political balance. And the council is asked to note that the councillor Janet Abbott has joined the Conservative group. Well, that concludes this evening's meeting, and thank you, members, for your attention and the meeting. I'd remind you earlier, I invited you to a mince pie and a glass of wine, so yes. Would you please join me?